Hey there, this is Derek Murphy. I'm going to make this video about writing a final battle scene. So last night, when I was stuck on the scene that I'm writing, which is a final battle scene for the fourth book in a series, I made a video about the NaNoWriMo blog post that I had written and got posted on NaNoWriMo, which is about how to finish your novel. And they were more like big picture, general, make sure your book is good stuff. Although I did touch on a few things that are related to, ending your book with a satisfying resolution. So that video is a little bit scatterbrained, even though the article is good, and I tried to walk through the article. But because I was nervous and stressed out about trying to finish this scene when I only have 4 more days now to get this book clean and perfect and published, because it's up on pre-order already. So I was struggling with this final battle scene, and after pulling an all-nighter, now it's like 3 p.m. the next day. I have my shades drawn, which is why it looks so dark in my office. But I have gone through and wrote a crappy rough draft of the final battle scene for this book, which I know is good enough that I can make really good in the next round of revision. So while it's all still fresh in my mind, I thought it would be neat if I could make a final battle checklist. And a lot of this stuff is stuff I've written before or commented on before. A lot of this stuff is from my book Bookcraft or other videos, but I haven't had like a final battle scene checklist yet. And this one is imperfect. These are kind of quick notes, but I'm going to talk through these things and then see if I can clean up this checklist a little bit more, enough to the point where it could be an infographic or some good content that I can share. But in this video, I'm just going to walk through the final battle scene checklist that I have written while it's fresh in my mind from this final battle scene that I have just finished writing. So I will probably reference the scene. If you are, a fan of young adult Greek mythology inspired urban fantasy, who is reading my Scarlet Thread series, then skip this video because I'm going to, give away a lot of juicy stuff about, what happens in book 4 of the series. But I'm going to assume that most people who follow me on YouTube don't read my fiction anyway, and this is really just for, to help you write better battle scenes. So a battle scene is going to start with a confrontation, and generally this is something like, you killed my father, prepare to die, or, you'll never get away with this, we're here to stop you, whatever. They charge in, and there's an important thing where all good conflict is unplanned, because smart characters don't go into, when the odds are against them, smart characters don't go into conflict willingly unless they think that they can win and they're overconfident, but you can never actually let them win because that's bad drama. So they always have to be surprised. But anyway, I bring that up because probably they're not going into battle seeking battle. They probably have a mission to stop the villain or antagonist, but they're not planning on engaging in direct confrontation. So, when they accidentally get pinned or stuck or whatever, and they're face to face with the bad guy, then they're forced into conflict. It may not be what they planned on, but they are determined to stop the villain from whatever they are doing. Maybe they're not trying to like kill the villain, but they're trying to interrupt the villain's dastardly plan, which puts them in confrontation. So that's basically just like a face-off where, they line up against each other and they're like, it's time to go, and they fight, they draw their weapons, or whatever. But number 2 is unexpected forces. So there's an ambush or an overwhelm. The battle has to be harder than anticipated. It can't be like, it can never be the case where it's an easy win for your hero or the hero's allies. It can't just be the hero shows up and they fight and the hero wins because the hero is stronger. That's not good story. That's not good drama. There needs to be a lot more to unpack in a battle scene. So it's not just about the fighting and the action. It's about the other stuff in between and breaking up the action, which I'll talk about in a minute. But basically, they have to be overwhelmed with unanticipated opposition. In my particular case, she tracks down Hera, Zeus's wife, and she's trying to stop her from destroying the world or whatever. But Hera resurrects army of zombies. And my protagonist has this ability to see the threads of fate, which allows her to, you know, control people or attack people pretty easily. She can kind of just swipe them aside. But because these are zombies, she doesn't have that ability over them, which puts her at a severe disadvantage. So suddenly she's, facing an army of zombies, and she's learning how to fight a little bit with a sword, but she's really not that great. And even though she has one ally with her, and she has this super powerful weapon that, should be really easy. This is the basic problem I was having with this scene, is that she has the weapon to kill Hera really easily. So why doesn't she just reach up and, cut Hera's thread, and that's the end of it? I can't let that be the final battle scene because that's too easy. I have to interrupt and disarm my protagonist so that the real fighting ensues. So that leads basically to number 3, which is divided and unarmed. Even if they come in with a plan or with weapons, they probably get captured or pinned down or overwhelmed. They lose their weapon. So this, what I had to have happen in this scene, because I don't want it to end too quickly, is that magical weapon that she has gets taken away from her by the zombie horde as she's being thrown around by this undead army. So she loses that weapon. That puts her at a huge disadvantage. She's divided from her ally and alone. So that has to happen, basically. You have to put your protagonist at a disadvantage in your final battle scene. I feel like this one's in the wrong place. Number 4, help or support from allies. But basically, like, now she's at a disadvantage and everything looks really bleak because she's overpowered by this huge force. She gets unprompted support or help from arriving allies. This is I forget my Lord of the Rings lore, but when the battle is raging and they all are stalling, basically waiting for Gandalf to show up on the hill leading the armies on the third day. So it's the arrival of support, which gives them a level playing field again, so that there's a possibility of success. Yeah, so this is a little bit, I don't know if I want to edit right now. Okay, I moved these around a little bit, but something else that I talk about a lot is the inner or the outer battle, which means kind of two things. 3 things maybe. On the one hand, I'm a little bit sleep deprived, so this might be, less coherent than usual, but the inner or the outer battle generally means, while your protagonist is facing off one-on-one with the antagonist, a personal battle, the forces of both sides are raging full-on battle. So all the allies are just holding off all the bad guys, thousands or hundreds or dozens or whatever. They're battling it out, while the protagonist and the antagonist, the villain and the hero, go up one-on-one against each other. So everybody else is just counting on the protagonist to be able to defeat the antagonist. So they're all stalling because there's too many bad guys. But if the protagonist can defeat if the protagonist can defeat the antagonist, then the war will be won or whatever. So that's why then the number 6 is alone with the antagonist. I added a little star asterisk here because I'm going to talk about another kind of inner outer battle in a minute. But basically, this is the, while the war is raging, the protagonist chases after the antagonist and they have a final face-off. This is where there's probably going to be a big reveal or an info twist. The problem with the final battle scene is basically it's fighting, but it also has to have an unexpected info twist that leads to a resolution which is going to lead to a realization or a personal epiphany or change in the final moment. So while the battle is raging, you basically have to de-arm your protagonist, put your villain and your hero up against each other privately so they can have a little bit of, witty banter, or this is where the villain reveals something really damaging. In my case, in this scene, my protagonist is pregnant with Zeus's baby, but she doesn't know that until Hera tells her. So that's another reason why she might hesitate, even though she's gotten the shears back and she's got her weapon and she could just cut the thread. She's basically telling Hera, it's over. And Hera tells her that she's pregnant, and that throws her off her game. She's shocked and surprised. So there's this pause. In a lot of books, this will be a scene called, I think Sean Coyne in Story Grid says it's the hero at the mercy of the villain scene, which is common in thrillers, but it's also common in most kinds of literature, even if it's not fantasy sci-fi, even if it's not a real antagonist. This is when the hero is completely destroyed or debilitated by the object that is repressing her. So if there's a fatal flaw or a childhood trauma or a fear that's been holding them back the whole time, this is when they have the full realization of that thing. Doesn't mean they can act on it yet. They're just realizing or recognizing what's been holding them back. So in this final moment, this is where I have the asterisks. There's an inner and outer battle because it's not just about whether or not the protagonist is strong enough to defeat the antagonist. She shouldn't be. The hero shouldn't be more powerful than the villain. The villain should be more powerful because it has to force the character to change. The internal shift, which is a realization or reckoning, the protagonist becomes aware of something they didn't know before. This internal shift allows them to change or forces them to change. It might be because of the info that they got from the villain. It might be sometimes there's a deep flashback during the final battle scene. I explained this a little bit better in my other video about the 5 steps for finishing your book, so check that out. But basically there's a point where they deliberately and consciously change or move away from whatever rule, whatever guideline, whatever belief that they had that was repressing them. They consciously move past that. It's a big internal shift. The point of the entire book was to force the protagonist to shift with a conflict that was beyond their capabilities. So the final battle scene is not just about defeating the villain, it's forcing the protagonist into a pressure boiler and going past any kind of stress or tension that they've ever faced before, so that they are forced, like a coal turning into a diamond, they are forced to become their most powerful or their greatest self. So in that final moment, when the inner battle is won and they've shifted or changed or become more, whatever that's going to look like. I don't have a great example in this case because this is a weird book. It's a book 4 in a series, and this is the final action battle scene. But later there's a final battle scene, which isn't really a physical battle. So that's the actual end of the book, where she has this realization and she makes like a deliberate statement. The villain will offer the hero exactly what they wanted, like the opportunity to go away. Like, if you just go away, if you just leave me alone, I'll give you whatever you always wanted. I'll bring your family back. They will forgive you. They will love you. This is the point where the hero refuses that exit. They're offered the exit strategy. They're offered an out. The thing that they've always wanted is, served up to them on a plate. Temptation. They resist the temptation and decide to stick with the battle, even though it may destroy them, because they've changed in the telling of the story, so they no longer want or need that stuff that they thought they wanted or needed before. So I sort of have some of that in my final later battle scene. And then finally, at the end, they lose the battle, or there's a surprise escape. The villain escapes, or they escape the villain. It depends on what you're writing. It depends if it's a standalone, if they triumph. But generally, in a lot of cases, the hero will get away, or they will escape the villain's. Sorry, the villain will get away, or the hero will escape the villain's clutches at the last minute. So it's basically like we survived, we learned something new, we lived on to fight another day, but the villain's still out there. We didn't finish the battle. This is book 4. Hera will actually die in this book, but not right now in this battle scene. This is a big battle scene where she actually loses the battle and gets kidnapped. So just for fun, I have 2 more down here under number 10, because I'm not sure how to communicate these, but I want to talk about how I did them in my scene. I feel like I don't have this order sorted out really well. If you have questions or comments, if you want to reorder my list for me, that would be useful in the comments or whatever. But let me mention a couple other things. So number 10 under vivid imagery, the challenge in fight scenes is that you always want to be escalating your description of the battles. So you don't want to start off in the beginning of a book with a lot of really detailed, traumatic, vivid, violent imagery, because it's not really going to matter, because none of it matters. The stakes of the battle don't matter until you've made readers love your characters with the slower scenes. I've done a lot of that in this book. Nothing in this particular battle is the other thing is, like, I was going to say nothing in this, nobody's really going to get hurt in this battle, which isn't at all true. But I'm thinking of, like, in my next book, a lot of the slow scenes and the character world building stuff I did in this book are going to have a huge emotional impact in the next book when some characters actually die. But in a really strong battle scene, there should be consequences. Somebody should get hurt. So she should feel some guilt or loss about somebody getting hurt. And there could be an element of betrayal or surprise. I have both of those going on. And also you want vivid imagery. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the stuff that happens in my scene and hope that it relates to these 2 points. Basically, the reason I was stuck on this scene was because I didn't know how it all fit together. So I had to figure out, they're basically in India. There's an underground buried cemetery or crypt or tomb under a modern city. So there's this huge hole in the ground and a modern city. And you have Hera, who is Kali with her 4 arms, this monstrous kind of Hulk figure throwing buses around. So that's pretty cool. We have her fallen angel friend who consumes magic and becomes really demonic. So he becomes really powerful because he can, consume all this magic, but he also gets unreliable because the more magic he consumes, the more he kind of loses control of himself and just becomes a monster who feeds on magic. So I have this, like, fallen angel demon with mechanical wings and 2 flaming swords, which is really cool. I also have one of the hounds of hell, the surviving hound of hell, which is her love interest, who in wolf form kind of like leaps over her. I thought about having her, like, ride the wolf through the zombies, which would have been awesome. I'm not sure if I can fit that in, but for now the wolf just jumps over her head and swats away all the wall of angels so that she can get a clear shot at Hera. That's a cool little scene. But there's this moment, and this is a scene that I had mapped out, like, probably over a year ago when I started writing this book, which is a really powerful image. So she has kind of a little sister who is one of Zeus's bastard daughters, and Zeus can possess his children. and he's already done this to this girl. She's like a young girl. He's already done this once and killed the Fates, but the young girl doesn't know because she was kind of blacked out. So they put these like golden bangles on the young girl's arms to protect her from Zeus possessing her, because Zeus is too much energy, too powerful. If he possesses her with those like iron bracelets or golden bracelets or whatever, they'll kind of burn. So in this scene, she is reaching up for Hera's thread with the golden shears. She's going to kill Hera, and the young girl, her like little sister, is running towards her with the demon angel chasing after her, now completely monstrous, and she thinks that, you know, he's lost his sense and he's chasing after the little girl. So she sort of protects the little girl as she reaches up for Hera's thread, and then she realizes that that Zeus has possessed the little girl again. So her sister grabs onto her and electrocutes her basically, and so that she can't, because Zeus is protecting Hera. So to stop her from killing Hera, Zeus possesses the little girl, grabs her, electrocutes her, even though it burns off the little girl's arms, like down to bloody stumps, basically. And that's the end of the scene. It's a really violent, really drastic um, scene, which I think is really powerful. It's a little rough right now. I've got to, clean it up. But when I finish writing it, for people who are reading it for the first time, sorry if I just, spoil the whole thing for you. But it's going to be a really powerful scene because I've set it up really well and it's sudden. Like I said, you have to stop the hero from defeating the villain. You have to surprise them somehow with a surprise twist. I always like all my scenes to end with a surprise twist, but especially this particular one because it's a big final battle scene. Also, like I was saying before, this is book 4 in a series, so I have to make bigger and more visually stunning fight scenes than I have done in other books, and I've already had some pretty big ones before. So this one has to be like even more over the top. Book 5 has to be like insane, which is going to be a fun challenge. I've never written a book 4 before. This is my first book 4 in a series, so I'm really excited about getting it done. And I'm really excited about these scenes. And it is harder to, when you're 4 books deep in a series, to find fresh, unique twists where it doesn't feel like you're just going through the motions or just fighting and running and fighting and running. You have to keep coming up with new plot twists and story reveals and background information to keep things fresh and interesting. I'm really excited about this book. So hopefully this checklist or the way that I've talked about my story prompts you to do better with your fight scenes, because I know fight scenes are tricky. I didn't get into like the nuts and bolts of the combat stuff. You can basically like watch kung fu movies or videos or YouTube. There's a bunch of really good stuff on YouTube about, combat training, fighting with knives or whatever. But the main thing to keep in mind is that, and you'll see this all the time, like the final battle scene has the least amount of weapons. Going up to all the other challenges, like they will have guns or swords and they will chop through or shoot through hundreds of bad guys. But when they get to the final battle scene, it's drawn out. The hero and the villain, either, because they're gentlemen, they decide to put down their weapons, or they just, they fight, but they miss, and then they lose their weapons somehow. There's like a de-escalating before they go face to face. It's always like fist to fist, trading blows, slow, meaty, violent, visceral combat. It's not just, a stab or a bullet to the head or whatever. Your final battle scene, you have to draw out the conflict by avoiding a direct confrontation, because in a direct confrontation, the villain should be stronger than your hero and they would just win really easily. Or if your villain has the upper hand, that's no good because there's no drama. So for your final battle scenes, you have to find a way of stalling it out. They trade blows. I talked about this pretty well in one section of Bookcraft, the book, where I reference a Jamie Lee Curtis movie, I think. But there's basically like it's a fight or it's a dance where they're never stuck in a corner together where they could just finish each other off, because then the battle would be over. They're they're grabbed and they're tear away and they run away, they get chased. It's always an avoiding of the conflict for as long as possible. That's the final battle scene. So anyway, let me know if you have any specific questions. I feel like I might have mentioned some good stuff, but this is also a massive video. Hopefully I'll use your comments or questions to clean this list up a little bit. Maybe I'll try to take a second pass at it once I've had some more time and sleep to go through this. I'm basically a few chapters away now that this was the big hard scene that I had to finish. Now I'm pretty comfortable finishing up the last couple chapters in the next 48 hours and then doing a final couple rounds of proofreading and editing and revising to get this book up on time and to get it finished. But I hope that I hope that if you like this video, you stick around, subscribe to my YouTube video. I don't always ramble as much as I did in this video, though I can't promise I don't do that in other videos. Hopefully I also said some useful stuff. Thanks. Bye-bye.